Sil screamed at me because I announced my pregnancy at a family dinner, because she previously had miscarriages. So Mill insisted I get rid of my baby and tried to throw away my medications. I already know my mother-in-law is crazy, but I'm on Reddit today just to make sure I'm right, due to the ongoing argument with my husband about her. So, this year I found out I was pregnant. It came as a complete surprise to both me and my husband because we weren't actively trying to conceive. Initially, we took some time to let the news sink in and to cherish the excitement privately. For about a month and a half, we kept it to ourselves, discussing how and when to share the news with our families. Eventually, we decided that such a special moment deserved a special announcement, so we planned a grand luncheon at our home. We invited all our loved ones, eager to celebrate this new chapter of our lives together. The day of the gathering arrived, and our house was filled with warmth, chatter, and the smell of delicious food. After everyone had settled in, my husband and I decided it was the perfect time to share our news. With hearts pounding and smiles plastered on our faces, we stood up and announced, "We have some exciting news to share, we're pregnant." Hearing this, everyone's reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly joyful. My parents practically leapt out of their seats, their faces lighting up with pure happiness. They began congratulating us enthusiastically, their voices mingling with the other family members' well wishes and excitement. The room was buzzing with energy, and for a moment, it felt like everything was perfect. But then, I noticed something odd. My Sil and Mill weren't sharing in the joy like everyone else. Instead, they looked off. Sil's face was pale, and her expression was tight, while Mill wore a similar look of disapproval. Before I could fully process it, Sil suddenly burst into tears, right there in front of everyone. At first, we all thought they were tears of joy. It seemed like the logical reaction to such happy news. But then, Sil turned toward me, her face red and filled with anguish, and shouted, "How could you do this to me?" Her words echoed in the room, leaving everyone stunned and silent. Without waiting for a response, she then turned on her heel and ran straight to the washroom. I looked around, trying to make sense of what had just happened, only to see Mill shaking her head at me and my husband. She looked at us, disappointed. Then, she followed her daughter toward the washroom, leaving us standing there bewildered. Everyone was utterly stunned by the turn of events. My husband tried his best to calm the rest of the guests, who were now awkwardly murmuring among themselves and exchanging puzzled looks. Meanwhile, I decided to step away from the gathering to check on my Sil, hoping to understand what I had done to upset her so deeply. As I approached the washroom, I could hear raised voices inside. Sil and my mother-in-law were talking loudly, their words muffled by the door but unmistakably tense. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach the situation, but finally knocked gently on the door. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to sound calm and supportive, though I could feel my own anxiety rising. A moment later, the door was flung open, and Sil stood there, her face red and her eyes blazing with anger. She didn't look okay, she looked furious. Without giving me a chance to speak, she began to yell at me, "How dare you get pregnant just after what I have been through? How can you be this cruel to me?" That's when it finally hit me, and I understood the context of her outburst. You see, Sil had suffered her third miscarriage only a few months earlier. My heart had broken for her at the time, and my husband and I had done everything we could think of to support her. We had met with her and had made sure she knew we were there for her. But despite all our support, it was clear that her grief was still fresh, and the news of my pregnancy had hit a deeply painful nerve. However, my pregnancy hadn't been planned, it was a surprise to us, too. There was no sense of competition or intent to hurt her on my part. If anything, I wished with all my heart that she hadn't experienced such devastating losses. But Sil continued to yell at me, and accused me of being selfish and inconsiderate, insisting that my decision to announce my pregnancy at the luncheon was hurtful given her recent loss. Mill, standing right behind Sil like her backup, chimed in saying that I should have had the decency to at least give Sil a heads up before the announcement instead of rubbing it in her face and pushing her to react this way. Her tone was condescending and accusatory, as if I'd orchestrated the entire event to hurt Sil intentionally. I was taken aback by the audacity of her assumption. I took a deep breath and calmly responded, pointing out that it was never my intention to hurt Sil. I explained that I genuinely hadn't thought my pregnancy announcement would have such a deep impact on her. Also, why should I have given her a heads up? After all, Sil and I weren't particularly close. Yes, she was my husband's sister, and I'd always visited her out of courtesy when my husband wanted to see her, but beyond those familial obligations, there wasn't much of a personal relationship between us. The truth is, I'd always felt like an outsider when it came to Sil and Mill. Their treatment of me had been far from warm and welcoming. Both of them enjoyed bullying me, especially when they were together. In fact, right from the start, they had never liked me. I remember when I went bridal dress shopping with them before my wedding. I'd been so excited about that special day and had invited them along, hoping it would be a bonding experience. Instead, they spent the entire time tearing me down. No matter what dress I tried on, they'd find something negative to say. They made comments like, "Your arms look too fat, and that dress makes your stomach look huge," as if their only goal was to shatter my confidence. It was baffling because I wasn't even out of shape. Worked out regularly, went to the gym 3 times a week, and had been an athlete back in college. I was healthy, fit, and happy with my body. But their remarks felt cruel, designed to make me second-guess myself. However, I didn't let their negativity sway me. I picked the dress I loved most, ignoring their jabs. And on my wedding day, that decision paid off. I was showered with compliments about my dress from friends and family. I couldn't help but notice how small Mill and Sil's faces looked as they saw me thriving despite their efforts to undermine me. Throughout my marriage, Mill and Sil have continued to offend me here and there. Most of the time, I've chosen to ignore their behavior or let my husband handle it, preferring to keep the peace. However, this time was different. Their behavior went far beyond their usual antics. They were outright accusing me of wrongdoing over something I had no control over: my pregnancy announcement. No matter how much I tried to pacify Sil, she continued to berate me. Luckily, my husband and mother, noticing my prolonged absence, came to check on me. When my husband walked in and heard the tail end of Sil's accusations, he was furious. He firmly told her that she needed to stop accusing me just because I was pregnant and she is not. He yelled at her that she needed to stop thinking that the world revolved around her. Just because she had a miscarriage didn't mean that anyone else around her couldn't get pregnant or have children. His voice was calm but resolute, and it was clear he didn't like the way she blamed me. He went on to say to Sil that clearly she had lost her mind and was completely out of line for creating such a scene during what was supposed to be a joyous occasion for us. He asked her to leave our party and go back home so she could probably think things over, and asked his mom to leave with his sister and drive her home. Sil looked offended hearing this, and Mill tried to argue by showing support for her daughter, but my husband put his foot down. He threatened that if they didn't leave voluntarily, he would humiliate them in front of everyone by exposing their behavior. In the end, Mill and Sil had no choice but to leave. After the luncheon, my husband followed up with his family in private, determined to set boundaries. He made it clear to Mill and Sil that their behavior was unacceptable and that if they didn't apologize to me for what they had said and done, he would cut them off entirely. Sil refused outright, doubling down on her stance and refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. She said she meant every word she said to me, since she felt nothing but disdain for me and our baby. She accused my husband and me of knowingly getting pregnant so we could have the one thing she was struggling to have, a baby. Hearing this, my husband told her that if she really felt this way, then she would have no place in our lives ever again and cut her off. On the other hand, Mill reluctantly agreed to meet with me to apologize, which I thought at the time was a good thing. So, that same week, Mill and I met up. Her apology was awkward and hesitant, but she did express regret for how things had played out. She admitted that she didn't think I'd done anything wrong by getting pregnant and sharing the news the way I had. However, she explained that she felt compelled to defend Sil, given everything her daughter was going through. Her words felt more like an attempt to justify her behavior than a genuine apology, but I chose to forgive her with grace. Mill then began to ask me innocuous questions about how I felt about becoming a mother soon, if I truly liked the idea, and whether I was ready for the challenges ahead. She told me how being a mother was not all fun and games as parents make it believe, and that it was going to be very grueling. I listened politely and then smiled, replying honestly. "I know it won't be easy," I said. "I'm not expecting to be the perfect mother, especially not right away. This is my first child, and I'm sure there will be a lot of learning involved. But I'm lucky to have such a supportive partner in my husband. Together, we'll figure it out." But Mill just shook her head, almost pityingly, and said, "You can't depend on your husband for this. He's a man, after all. You're the woman, and being a mother is your responsibility. You need to be ready to take on all the duties, or you'll end up overwhelmed. If you're not prepared to be a good mother, then maybe you should think twice before going through with this pregnancy." Her words left me stunned. Did she really just suggest what I thought she did? Was she seriously implying that I should reconsider having my child? The sheer insensitivity of her comment, combined with its audacity, hit me hard. I stared at her for a moment, trying to process what she'd said. Why would you even say something like that? Me and my husband are capable, responsible adults. We're financially stable, and we've already been talking about how to support each other through this journey. What makes you think I'm not ready, or that I shouldn't go through with it? My voice was steady, but the disbelief was evident. Mill didn't flinch. Without missing a beat, she replied, "Just because you've been lucky enough to get pregnant and haven't lost the baby yet, like Sil, doesn't mean you'll be a good mother," she continued, claiming that she was only saying these things because she really cared about me and didn't want me to make a mistake by becoming a mother if I didn't want to become one. It's nothing personal, she shrugged and added, as though her comments weren't deeply personal attacks on my character and readiness as a parent to my baby. I was so pissed at her at the moment that I looked her straight in the eye and said, "If you have the audacity to say something like that to me, then you can stay far, far away from me and my baby. I am not going to abort my child, and I'll make sure my husband knows exactly how his mother feels about our pregnancy." My voice was firm, fueled by anger and resolve, and I meant every word. Mill's reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened in shock, and she quickly began backtracking, stumbling over her words in an attempt to diffuse the tension. "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings," she said, her tone suddenly much softer. "I was just giving you some good advice, you know, as a fellow mother." She apologized awkwardly and even tried to lighten the mood by joking, "If you're not capable enough to take care of the baby, I'll help out in any way I can." Her attempt at humor fell flat, and I wasn't amused. After that meeting, I made it a point to keep my distance from Mill as much as possible. I told my husband about what had happened, and while he agreed that his mother's comments were deeply insensitive, he didn't want to escalate the situation further at the time since she did apologize to me and he wanted to think the best of her. Meanwhile, SIL continued to remain icy and refused to speak to either of us, which was fine by us. Then, while I was still a few months pregnant, Mill's basement flooded after a period of heavy rain, causing significant damage. She needed a place to stay temporarily while the repairs were being done. Unfortunately, SIL was out of town with her husband on a trip, leaving Mill without many options. The only choice she had was to stay with us. When my husband told me, I agreed, albeit reluctantly, to let her stay with us for a few days. It was the right thing to do, and I hoped that maybe this time, things could remain civil. My husband promised me that I had his support and that he wouldn't let her cross any lines. Letting Mill stay with us turned out to be an even bigger mistake than I had anticipated. During her stay, she interfered with everything around the house. She wanted to have a say in every little detail of my life, from how I cooked to when I did my laundry every week. But the most frustrating part was her involvement in planning the nursery. I had carefully chosen a soft pastel yellow wallpaper for the nursery. I wanted to create a calm and welcoming atmosphere perfect for a little one's room. But Mill had other ideas. She insisted that I should change it to beige because, according to her, it would be more stylish and easier on the eyes than yellow. When I refused, she tried to talk to my husband behind my back to convince him to change my mind. Luckily, my husband simply ignored her and firmly asked her to not involve him in such matters. He told her that he trusted me to choose whatever color I felt like. However, when I found out about how Mill had gone behind my back to complain to my husband about something so trivial, I couldn't hold back. I confronted her just to remind her in case she forgot that this was my baby's nursery, and it was my decision how it should look since I was the mother and not her. It was as though she was back to her old self trying to take control of every little decision, as if my choice for my baby's nursery didn't matter. I had to put my foot down. Mill seemed taken aback by my response and looked visibly pissed off about what I said to her, but after that, at least she kept her mouth shut. Next, I was taking doctor-prescribed medications to support my pregnancy, as per my doctor's advice. When Mill noticed this, she immediately became nosy and began bombarding me with intrusive questions about what the medications were for and why I needed them. She then launched into a speech about how back in her day, women never took such medications during pregnancy and still managed to have healthy babies. She implied that I was overreacting or overly reliant on modern medicine, even questioning my judgment for following my doctor's orders. Mill smugly insisted that I should stop taking the medications altogether because, according to her, she knew better than any doctor. I was beyond irritated but decided to ignore her comments, assuming she would eventually drop the subject. Surely, I thought, she couldn't actually believe she knew better than a medical professional. But I was wrong. Just a day later, I discovered that all my medications were missing. I kept them in a specific drawer in our bedroom for easy access, but they were nowhere to be found. I searched the entire house, checking and rechecking every possible spot, but they were gone. Frustrated and worried, I told my husband about the missing medications and shared my suspicion that Mill might have taken them. At first, he was hesitant to believe his mother could do something so extreme. However, when he confronted her about it, she didn't even try to deny it. She admitted to throwing my medications in the trash. My husband went to check, and sure enough, he found the discarded bottles, confirming her outrageous actions. Mill defended herself by claiming that she had done it for my own good. She insisted that the medications might be dangerous for my body and that I should be strong enough to go through the pregnancy without any help. Her reasoning was infuriatingly ignorant, and the sheer audacity of her interference left both my husband and me livid. It wasn't just that she had taken my medications without permission, it was the fact that she thought she had the right to make such decisions for me as if she was the authority over my pregnancy instead of me or my doctor. My husband tried to rationally explain to Mill that these medications were a common part of pregnancy care and that a lot of pregnant women take them generally. These medicines would ultimately benefit the baby. He hoped to make her understand that there was no shame in taking them and that they were prescribed by a qualified doctor according to my health to ensure the best possible outcomes for our child. But Mill just brushed him off, her tone dismissive as she proclaimed, "I know better than you two." She even said how I was going to be a terrible mother if I didn't learn to take her advice, as she had been a mother before me. That was the final straw. My husband and I immediately told Mill to pack her things and leave our house that very day. As she scrambled to explain herself, we made it crystal clear that her behavior was completely unacceptable. My husband told her in no uncertain terms that we were done with her toxic antics. Her reckless actions had crossed every boundary, and we would no longer tolerate her in our lives. We informed her that she was not going to be a part of our child's life ever. Mill broke down in tears, begging us to forgive her and trying to backtrack, claiming she hadn't meant any real harm. But we no longer had any room left for her manipulative behavior in our home, in our lives, or around our future child. Ever since then, Mill was out of our lives and I was finally happy. Recently I gave birth to my baby and I have absolutely been loving being a first-time mom. My husband and I have both taken leaves from our work so we can be at home and help each other out. Yesterday, Mill showed up at our doorstep unannounced. After almost 4 months of silence, we thought we had gotten rid of her since we wanted nothing to do with her. Yet here she was, standing on our doorstep, insisting she wanted to talk. My husband and I exchanged hesitant glances, but after a moment, he reluctantly opened the door to let her in. He figured it would be better to hear her out and address whatever she had to say than to leave things unresolved. As we sat down, Mill began by saying how she had come to realize her mistakes after being cut off from us for all these months. She admitted that she had acted out of loyalty to SIL, allowing her emotions and SIL's pain to cloud her judgment. "When I saw how your pregnancy affected my daughter, I just wanted to protect her," she confessed to me. "And I guess in my anger, I wanted to hurt you back. I am sorry for throwing away your medications and for interfering in any other decisions. I wasn't thinking clearly at the time." Then, Mill continued to say how her continuing to support SIL's behavior was useless since there was no guarantee that she would ever become a mother. She insisted that now that she had apologized to us, we needed to forgive her immediately so she could finally have this one final opportunity to be a grandma to our son. My husband could see from my face that I was not happy or convinced, so he told her that we needed some time to think and then she left. Ever since this conversation, my husband has been insisting that we should give his mother another chance, but I'm just not ready. Aita? Update 1. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up so fast. I hope my SIL or Mill are not on Reddit. I agree with everyone's comment that my mother-in-law clearly cannot be trusted. There's no way she has suddenly changed. I'm certain she still resents me, and if I let her in now, she will likely try to harm me in some way later. As for my husband, please don't criticize him. He has always stood up for me. I think he's feeling differently now because he's just become a father and wants our baby to meet his mother. I plan to talk to him about this. As for my sister-in-law, she hasn't been in contact with us. She still dislikes me, especially because I became a mother before her. She goes around telling people that it should have been her and that she should have had the first grandchild in the family, not me. Update 2. This week, I decided to sit down and have a proper talk with my husband. I wanted to share my feelings and make sure he understood why I was so hesitant about allowing his mother back into our lives, especially after all the hurt she had caused. I started by telling him about the countless things that SIL and Mill had said about me over the months and how it had made me feel. I reminded him of how his sister, who hadn't apologized once since that painful day, had continued to distance herself from us just because I was pregnant and she wasn't. It was hard for me to grasp how someone could be so consumed by jealousy and hurt, yet completely unwilling to make amends or check in on us. I also reminded my husband about all the times Mill had tried to undermine me, from criticizing my pregnancy to suggesting I give up on it entirely. I had felt completely unsupported by her throughout my pregnancy, and instead of feeling like a part of the family, I felt attacked and isolated. Every time she'd belittled my choices or tried to convince me I was doing things wrong, I had to swallow my frustration and push forward. After everything they'd done and said, I asked him, "Why should I trust your mother now even though she is apologizing? She's done so much damage and has shown me nothing but disrespect. I'm just not sure I can let go of all the hurt they've caused." I could see my husband processing everything I said. He agreed that, despite his mother's apology, we couldn't simply move past all of her actions as though it never happened. Trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight, and we needed to protect our family from further harm. In the end, My husband has agreed to meet with his mother privately and talk to her about this decision. He could have addressed her in front of me, but I didn't want to risk her making another scene and taking out all her anger on me, especially with everything that had already transpired. I feel a bit relieved knowing that my husband has my back. He understands where I am coming from and he is taking the lead in setting boundaries with his mother. Update 3. It's been a while since I updated anything here, but since people have been asking me in my DMs about what exactly happened between my husband and Mill, here it goes. When my husband told Mill that we couldn't let her back into our lives and that we didn't want her to meet our baby, her reaction was nothing short of explosive. According to him, she immediately began blaming me for everything, shouting that he wasn't man enough to stand up to me and that I was the one who had somehow turned him against her and his sister. She insisted that she didn't care about my feelings, but that he needed to fight for her to be involved in our baby's life because, after all, she was the grandmother, and our baby needed to know her. My husband assured her that our baby already had a grandmother, my mom, and that our child would be just fine without ever knowing Mill. But this only seemed to push Mill further over the edge. She lashed out, attacking my husband's character, calling him a terrible father and even going so far as to say that she wished our baby had died and that Sil's baby had been born instead because then at least Sil would have let her be in the baby's life. My husband told me later that he was so appalled by his mother's reaction that he had to leave quickly before he lost his temper with her. He knew it wasn't worth getting dragged into a toxic argument with his mother, but I could see the toll it had taken on him. The words she said were not just harsh, they were unforgivable. To wish harm on our child, to wish that our baby hadn't made it, was a level of disgusting cruelty I just couldn't fathom. While I'm relieved that we are standing firm in our decision and protecting our family from her toxic behavior, it breaks my heart that Mill could hurt my husband like that. He's a good man, and he didn't deserve to be treated that way. No child should ever have to endure a parent who would go that far, no matter the situation. The pain that Mill inflicted on my husband is something that will take a long time to heal, and I just wish she could see the damage she's done not just to me, but to her own son. Update 4. Hello, everyone. I have an update. Sil reached out to us. Turns out, after this post went viral, someone may have recognized my story and shared the link with my sister-in-law, and she reached out to my husband to complain about me. According to her, I had no right to air our private family issues online. She also feels I didn't provide the full story and that people in the comments had bashed her and my mother-in-law without the proper context. She is trying to justify her behavior towards me by insisting that because she was going through a tough time and deserved more sympathy. My husband did go through my post after she sent him the link. He literally laughed and agreed with the comments bashing on her. He told his sister that he didn't find any issues with what I had shared because I had simply written the truth. He also suggested to Sil that instead of arguing with him, she should take a good, hard look at herself and realize just how toxic she really is. As for Mill, fortunately, she hasn't reached out to us at all. We did install several web cameras around the house after everyone's recommendations just for our protection.